Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had all the power, only for them to realize they were messing with the wrong person? That's exactly what happened when a so-called HOA Karen decided to come after me. She thought she could bully me, control me, and even sue me. But what she didn't know was the one detail that would flip her entire world upside down. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a Supreme Court judge. Now, let's start at the beginning, because this story is one of the wildest you will ever hear. I moved into a quiet neighborhood that was run by a homeowners association. If you don't know, HOAs can be helpful when they're run by reasonable people, but when the wrong kind of person gets control, they turn into mini dictators. And in this neighborhood, the so-called queen was a woman I'll call Karen. Karen loved power. She thrived on control. She didn't care about building community. She cared about rules, fines, and making herself feel important. She walked around with a clipboard like she was the president of the country, ready to write someone up for having their trash out 2 minutes too long. At first, I tried to stay under the radar. I didn't want trouble. My job was already stressful and important, but I never bragged about it. Nobody in the neighborhood knew who I was. To them, I was just another guy who bought a nice house. I didn't need to flash my title. I preferred peace. But Karen? She didn't care about peace. She cared about control. The first time she came after me was over my mailbox. Yes, my mailbox. According to her, it wasn't approved by the HOA. But here's the thing. It was the same model as 2 other houses down the street. When I pointed that out, she shrugged and said, "Well, theirs was approved. Yours wasn't." That was my first warning sign. Karen didn't care about fairness. She cared about targeting people. And for some reason, she had decided to target me. I replaced the mailbox anyway, just to avoid drama. But that wasn't enough for her. Next, she complained about the color of my shutters, then about the length of my grass, then about where my guests parked when they visited. It was like she had a personal mission to make my life difficult. At one point, she even told me, "If you don't like the rules, maybe you should find another neighborhood." Imagine that. A woman with zero authority beyond a volunteer HOA role was telling me where I should and shouldn't live. Now, here's where things got interesting. Karen wasn't just handing out fines and warnings. She was also filing actual lawsuits against homeowners. Yes, lawsuits. Most people didn't fight back because they didn't have the money or energy. They just paid her off to avoid stress. That's when she decided to sue me. Her claim? That I had made illegal modifications to my property. She accused me of breaking multiple HOA rules, and she wanted thousands of dollars in damages. You can imagine my reaction. I wasn't scared. I was annoyed. But here's the thing. I didn't reveal who I was. I wanted to see how far she would push her nonsense. Karen strutted around the neighborhood bragging about how she was going to put me in my place. She told neighbors, "Some people think they're above the rules, but they're about to learn I don't play games." She truly believed she had the power to crush me. Meanwhile, I was quietly collecting every letter, every fine, every message she sent. I documented everything. I knew the law, and I knew she was digging her own hole deeper and deeper. By the time the court date came, Karen was practically glowing with excitement. She walked into that courtroom with her stack of fake evidence, ready to embarrass me. But when the case was called, her smile began to fade, because the judge assigned to the case wasn't just any judge. It was me. That's right. I wasn't sitting at the defense table. I was sitting at the bench. Karen had no idea that the man she'd been harassing, fining, and suing was actually a Supreme Court judge. The look on her face when she realized it was priceless. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes widened. She stuttered, trying to form words. And all I could think was, "You really thought you could intimidate me?" Now, I want to pause here because this moment is important. This story isn't just about karma. It's about power, abuse, and how bullies operate. Bullies like Karen pick targets they think are weak. They don't go after people who can fight back. They go after the ones they assume are vulnerable. That's why she had been so confident. She thought I was just another homeowner she could steamroll. But here's the truth. When you abuse power, it always comes back around. I didn't slam the gavel down in anger. I didn't yell. I didn't embarrass her in front of everyone, even though she had tried to embarrass me. Instead, I did what real power does. I handled the case with fairness and professionalism. Her evidence was weak. Her claims were baseless. The fines she had issued were illegal. And when I calmly explained that to her in front of everyone, you could see the color drain from her face. Karen realized she wasn't the queen of the neighborhood anymore. She wasn't the one in control. But that was only the beginning, because this case didn't just end with me dismissing her nonsense. No, this case opened the door to something much bigger. It exposed years of her behavior, the way she had bullied other homeowners, and the way she had abused her tiny bit of authority. And once the truth came out, there was no going back. So the question is, how far did this go? What happened to Karen after she tried to sue the wrong person? Did she finally learn her lesson? Or did she double down and make things worse for herself? Stick around, because in the next part of the story, things explode in a way nobody saw coming. If you thought the moment Karen discovered I was a Supreme Court judge was the end of the story, you're wrong. That was just the spark. What came next was a fire that consumed everything she had built. Because the truth is, one case can open a door. And once that door is open, all the hidden secrets behind it come spilling out. When Karen's case against me collapsed, the courtroom was silent. Everyone could feel the weight of what had just happened. The woman who strutted around the neighborhood acting like she was untouchable had just been exposed. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, Karen made the biggest mistake of her life. She doubled down. "Your Honor," she stammered, "with all due respect, I don't believe this is fair. You're personally involved in this case. You should not be the one ruling." Now, to a normal person, that might sound reasonable. But here's the issue. She had filed a case against me under false pretenses. She knew her claims were weak, and she assumed I would settle before it ever got this far. She never expected it to blow up in her face. When she tried to accuse me of bias, I calmly reminded her, "The law doesn't bend for power plays. You came here with no evidence. Your claims are baseless. This case is dismissed." The gavel hit the wood. The case was over. But Karen wasn't done. The fallout in the neighborhood was immediate. People who had been living in fear of Karen suddenly saw her for what she really was, a bully with no backbone. Neighbors started approaching me quietly, almost nervously, sharing their own stories of how she had harassed them. One man told me she fined him $500 because his kids left their bikes outside for one afternoon. A single mother said Karen threatened to have her evicted because she planted flowers that weren't in the approved color scheme. Another family admitted they had been too scared to fight back when Karen took them to court over a fence that was 1 inch taller than the rules allowed. I listened to every story, and the more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just petty drama. This was a pattern. This was abuse. So I started digging, not as a neighbor, not even as a judge, but as someone who believes justice should apply to everyone, everywhere. What I found shocked me. Karen had been exploiting her role in the HOA for years. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was bending them for her own benefit. She had approved expensive landscaping for her own yard while denying other families the same requests. She had funneled HOA funds into projects that suspiciously benefited her friends. She had even threatened to sue elderly neighbors who couldn't afford to repaint their homes. This wasn't leadership. It was a dictatorship. Now, here's the thing about power. It can blind you. Karen thought nobody would ever challenge her. She thought people were too weak, too busy, or too afraid. And for a long time, she was right. But now she had gone after the wrong person. And the wrong person wasn't about to let her get away with it. I didn't retaliate out of anger. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because every single family in that neighborhood deserved better. So I called a meeting. When the day of the HOA meeting came, the room was packed. Normally, only a handful of people showed up. But this time, the place was standing room only. Every neighbor Karen had ever threatened, fined, or embarrassed showed up to watch what would happen. Karen walked in like she always did. Chin high, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered across her face. She thought she could still control the narrative. but she had no idea what was coming. I stood up and addressed the room. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about the way this HOA has been run. I said. Then I laid out everything I had uncovered. The unfair fines, the misuse of funds, the bullying, the intimidation. The room erupted. People who had been silent for years suddenly found their voices. One by one, neighbors stood up and shared their stories. It was like a dam had broken. And as all of this came pouring out, Karen's face went pale. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control. She was surrounded, exposed. But the final blow came when I reminded everyone of something important. The HOA exists to serve the community, not to serve one person's ego. With that, the motion was raised to remove Karen from her position as HOA president. The vote wasn't even close. Nearly every hand in the room went up in favor. Karen had been dethroned. Now, you might think that was the end of her story. But remember, people like Karen don't give up easily. She stormed out of that meeting furious, swearing she would take this all the way and that none of us had seen the last of her. And, in a way, she was right, because her actions didn't just get her removed from the HOA. They caught the attention of people outside the neighborhood, people who actually had the authority to hold her accountable in a bigger way. Investigations began. The financial records of the HOA were reviewed. And guess what? All those shady expenses, all that misuse of funds, all came to light. Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor anymore. She was now facing real legal consequences. The woman who once bragged about suing other families was suddenly the one being sued. The woman who fined people over flowers and fences was now the one writing checks. The woman who thought she was untouchable had finally been touched by justice. And here's the lesson in all of this. Power without accountability is dangerous. It can turn ordinary people into bullies. It can make someone like Karen believe she is above everyone else. But power built on intimidation never lasts. Because eventually someone stands up. Eventually, the truth comes out. For Karen, that truth came crashing down like a tidal wave. As for me, I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to, because the real victory wasn't about me. It was about the neighborhood finally being free. Families could plant flowers without fear. Kids could leave their bikes outside without their parents worrying about a $500 fine. People could live in peace again. And in the end, that was worth more than any gavel slam. So the next time you deal with a bully, remember this story. Remember that power is only as strong as the lies it stands on. And when those lies are exposed, even the mightiest Karen can fall.